We are here meeting to discuss and understand or have a pep talk about Linux. Really, it's a excited subject which I've been fascinated since many long years. And as long as the more you explore, the more you'll be excited to understand Linux. Okay, so here we are seeing the penguin, which is the official mascot or you can say symbol for the Linux. And Linux is having history, and let's understand how it has evolved and what's the purpose of it and how to use it, all that stuff. Okay, let's start up. So here is a brief diagram which says that say in 1987 we have an operating system called Minix. So what is this what is the Minix is? It is custom built software to work on any particular type of hardware. Okay, it is not flexible to use on the multiple softwares or multiple different hardwares. So then obviously we'll be getting problem because there are number of hardwares are there, and we need to use, maybe you are interested in HP hardware, I'm interested in say Lenovo or something like that, then we'll be having this problem. So if it is not compatible, then what I need to do, I need to take the source code, again recompile it, install the drivers and all that. So people will be having difficulty in using it. So what the people has done is, there is a guy called Andrew Tannenbaum has created this Minix. It's a very small OS, and there is a university or else labs, we call it as AT&T and Bell Labs. So what this guys has done is, the AT&T and Bell. So what this guys has done is, they took the source code of this Minix, or else they created their own, and what they created, they recreated the software such a way that a single software can be installed on multiple hardwares, okay, which is compatible. Then people started using it, and to make it happen, AT&T started. So once this is successful in the entire once the major companies saw this as a viable operating system, then what some companies has done, say companies like HP, AVX means IBM, and Sun Company, they are taking they took the software and they started creating their own software operating system. Okay, so AT&T Bell Labs, they created the software, and what they done is they started selling the source code to the different companies like HP, AX and Sun Solaris. So in turn, because they brought the source code to make the business, what HP or these companies or major hardware vendors has done is, they rebranded the software. Means once you buy the full source code, then you can do anything. They rebranded the software with their names and some customization according to the hardware what they created, and they integrated this hardware and software. Means if you take a IBM AX, it works only on the IBM hardware only. If you take HP Unix, it works only HP hardware only. Similar with the Sun Solaris. So this has again tied down the people from having a freedom to use choose the hardware and to choose the software, otherwise what they need. So again, people are forced to, or the companies are forced to buy the software and hardware, and you can understand about the upgrades and the hardware issues what we get, and this software can't be installed on another machine. Okay, so this happened for some days, and there is one guy called Linus Torvalds. So what he has done is, already there is open source movement is there since long, and what Linus Torvalds is a Netherlands engineer, he's a C programmer. So there is something called as Unix principles. So we'll discuss about Unix principle in next session. So what are the Unix principle is? Everything is a file, and like this there are many other things are called. And he took the basic Unix principles, not the source code. Source code is if you copy a file, the program file from any of these particular vendors, why they will give it, and so then they don't give it. And he took the source what you call idea or the principles and started creating his own kernel. So kernel, it's like the engine of your vehicle. He took the idea and he designed his own. And that's a point one. And the point two, what he has done is, he given it to the open source community, saying that okay, in every till this open Linux came into picture, generally we say copyrighted, means the copying is having somebody having the rights on it. So here he says that copylefted. So he gave the software to the internet community or else open source community, and he said that you can use whatever the way you want to use it, but only one condition is, consider you have developed say version 1, version 2. So version 2 is the latest and greatest and you are doing business on that. Try to give the version 1 at least to the open source community, so that the development might happen. Maybe down the line, okay, suppose I'm a company called say Start ABC. I took the source code and I created my own, I started developing my own application or some appliance or something like that. And so going forward, what I need to do is, if I develop version 1, version 2, version 3, I need to give the source code of this version 1 to open source. So what will happen is, maybe there is some bright engineer is there, what he will do, he will take this version 1 what I gave to is, and he might develop a very new idea for a different industry segment or some other solution. And going forward, after say version 3, 4, I might need a new idea and I take the idea from the what is given to the community. So it's a win-win situation and everybody can download it, compile it and start using this. So there is no licensing fees and it is maintained in the kernel.org. Okay, so Linus Torvalds has took the idea and developed his own kernel using it is developed in the C program, C language, and he given it for community. And from there, it means nobody can do the business with it. They need to either develop and do in a different format, and but they have to give it back. Then okay, so he renamed it as Linux. So what is a Linux? So he took if you take the names, here it is Unix. So this guy name is Linus Torvalds. So the engineer name is created is Linus Torvalds. So he integrated his name into the Linux. So he took the first two letters Li and NUX. Okay, so N, okay, or else you can say LINUX, means he says that U and the X. Hence he says that it is created by Linus Torvalds and it is Unix compatible, or it is designed on the base principles of, or else we call it as POSIX compliant. So generally all the Unix operating system are related are the POSIX compliants. And that is the same reason these HP, AIX and IBM, all the controllers are called Unix clones. Okay, and Linux is developed on the basis of the principles of Unix, but it's not there is no source code copied from here to there. And so once this kernel is given to the free world, then there is a company called Red Hat. So they got interested in this program and they said that okay, so using a simple kernel nobody can use it. Like if you have a brand new engine in your home, We can't do it anything without it because it needs the rest of the components. So what Red Hat had done is, because it is in the open source world, they took the software and they created the rest of the components, like service managers or display manager or installation, configuration, scripts and all that. And they released it as a Red Hat Linux. So from here we got a Red Hat Linux. Let's give it. So this Red Hat Linux is basing on the principles or the basing on the kernel of which is given by the Linus Torvalds. Okay. Then after once this is came and it is given as Red Hat 1, 2, 3 or 3.0, 4.0, and the peculiar feature of Linux is by default it is a server grade operating system. Then we get a doubt. Okay, what is a server grade operating system? Is in any operating system, if I install and configure any of the services what we need in the production, say like web server, DNS server, DHCP server, FTP, firewall. So if you have a facility to do everything in a single OS, then we can say it is a server grade operating system. Okay, so by default these are all built in inside of this Linux. So we don't have to download anything extra. And at that time there is no other operating system, or only the Unix is of course the operating system which provides it. So even though it is in the starting stages, say Red Hat 7.3 is a very famous version, and Red Hat 9 is also a very famous version. So the versions which are released by Red Hat in the initial stage are called Red Hat. So or else we can't differentiate it as a enterprise server or a workstation. The same software can be configured in both the ways. So going forward, what Red Hat has done is they said that okay, why don't we separate both? And after say Red Hat 3.0 or so they created something called as Enterprise Linux. So and later they created the two different streams. So what is the streams is? One is the enterprise grade and testing, okay, and free. So what is this enterprise grade? So what they will do, they will tune out to this software and take out any unnecessary software, or they do the first big fixes and all this, and they'll sell to the customer. But this is in open source movement and I can't sell it. So what is that you buy from a Red Hat is the support you buy from a Red Hat. Suppose you are running some 10 production Linux servers. So as long as if you are running in your company, the Red Hat will not come and ask you, okay, why you are not paying me the license fee, because you can install a CentOS also. I'll come to the CentOS. So what is that you take it is you take the license support. Means suppose you have a problem with the server Linux and you need some level 3 guy who can step in and do the service for you. Then you need to talk to the Red Hat and say that okay, I want to subscribe for the support. So when you buy a enterprise software, actually the software is free and the support is costly. It costs something. So they might be taking some $5,000 or $10,000 per year based on the environment what you have. And whenever you have an issue, you can raise a ticket and you can support it. Okay, that is the enterprise grade. There is a legal agreement between the Red Hat and to the companies. And there is a testing edition is also there. So here we call it as RHEL. Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So there is also testing version is called. So in this we have server and workstation. So in this we have, there is a software called Fedora. Then what is a Fedora is, okay, whenever you want to develop something new, you should have a test bench. So any new features, latest and greatest features, what you want to implement in the near future as in the production environment, you need to have some testing area that is called Fedora. So what they will do, they will insert all the new softwares, the ideas what they get, they give it to you world. You can download it. But Fedora, the support of Fedora, okay, the Red Hat says that okay, because it is a free course and they don't give the support. Okay, in every case we need to again ask for them. So you can expect that Fedora might be having some bugs in it, and it takes a little bit of time for us to debug it. It is not as smooth as the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay, good. So it has nice desktop environment. You can install it, configure it, and use it as your regular any other OS software. Then there is a free version is also there. That is called CentOS. Means cent, you can say it is as a 1 cent you can say, or else we can say cent percent or something like that. So whatever the Red Hat Enterprise Grade is there, it is renamed and given it as a CentOS. So what are the commands that works in the, means only the branding will change, the commands, the working capacity, everything will be the same, but the branding will change. It is given on the banner of CentOS. Again, what's the difference? You can use this software as a enterprise grade, but you don't get the or else it is community enterprise operating system. Okay, community, C for community, E for ENT for enterprise, and operating system. So it is community means it's a free agent and people can support it each other. So here again, if you want to have you can use it for production purpose, there is no problem in it, but you should have the skill to debug also. But if you want to have you don't want any risk on it, then go for the RHEL, which is the official version of Red Hat, and then you can get the license also. So license and the support. Okay, so how do you compare this with Windows environment? Okay, first thing is basically both are operating systems, and basically there are some architectural differences are there in both the operating systems. So one thing we can be sure is that there are very less, or I can't say that there are no worms or virus are there in Linux, because there are 1 or 2 evolved over a period of time because of the bug in the kernel. It is fixed later. So, but if you compare to the old versions of Linux and the Windows environment, first of all, they are both the operating systems, but the security is more tight in Linux. So how can you say? So you can take any file which is infected with any of the major software, major virus, so and try to copy it onto the Windows machine and let it run for say a couple of days, and copy the same file into Linux machine. So see what happens. So maybe if we are using the old versions of the Windows, then the software will start functioning and it might do some damage to the operating system. But here, if you copy the same into Linux environment, there is no damage happened even after 365 days or 10 years also, if the machine is up and running. Because here when you copy a file, it is kept under highly restricted permissions. So the first point is, okay, generally most of the applications are written in the any of the Windows languages. But in Linux, we need what are the languages it works. So Linux doesn't know what is a VB. So any application which is written in the VB or else anything that is related to the in the form of DLL files or this, the Linux doesn't understand. So if you don't understand, you can't interpret. If you can't interpret, you can't execute it. Right? So means any application that is written for the Windows world can't execute on the Linux, because the related compilers or interpreters are not there in the Linux. Okay, point one. Suppose there is some application, some virus created only to impact to the Linux environment, okay, using maybe Python. But here, okay, even though consider you created a binary, when you copy it, it is having the highly restrictive permissions. So we'll see the restrictive permissions, what is the permission set. So it will be having the least permissions set. So means without the execution permission. So if you don't have any permission to execute, even though you copy it as a root also, by default the least permissions are set. Then obviously it can't run, and if it can't run, it can't do any damage to the Linux environment. Okay, that's the basic reason. So apart from that, it has the built-in softwares to create a website. I don't have to download any other additional tools. Like I want to install a database. That software is available within the CD. I don't have to download it again. So in rest of the operating systems, that feature is not there. Again, we need to download it and install it. Okay, and there is a community. There is a lot of engineers out there who are ready to help in the Linux area. Okay, so this is a brief about the Linux, and once we start working on it, we will be coming to know how this will be, what is the advantage of using the Linux. So generally this will be in a startup companies, we can even configure it as a firewall or a router or a DNS server, DHCP server, web server, or everything can be configured in a single server, or we can put different, we can install different VMs or physical machines and configure the same. So all you need is the skill to configure it, and I don't have to pay anybody, because that is the goodness in the using of Linux. Okay, great. So let's try to install a Linux machine and see whether how it is hard to install it. So there is a misnomer in the since long that installing and learning Linux is a very tough. No, I would say it is other way around. I've been using the Linux since long days. I don't feel that it is a very tough area. Okay? It is only you should have the interest for the command line. Then you will feel happy. Of course, we have the GUI in the Linux also. So let's try to install the OS and see how we can deploy a Linux machine. Okay, so if you come to the Linux, there are at least 100 varieties of Linux are there. So right from the Fedora, Debian, Ubuntu, and there are at least 100 versions are there, or 100 different softwares are there. Good. So let's try to see. Let's try to create a okay, I have downloaded this software. It is a trial version, evaluation version. Okay, and I installed it. Once this is installed, then what I'm trying to create is trying to create a VM. Okay, so create a new VM, which is easy. So okay, so from where I can download the VM. Okay, let me close the other tabs. From where I can download the CentOS ISO. So this is the area you can download. So centos.org, you can go to download, and you can download the full ISO image. Okay, I have downloaded it. Okay, then here, so this is the area where I kept my CentOS, and okay, I'm saying okay. Okay, then next. So here it says that my new line. Okay, so you can give it any size, whatever you want, based on the disk size. Let's take the defaults and say next. Okay, and say finish. Okay, this is the first screen, and it is puts in 57 seconds. So here it says that do you want to test ISO image? No, we are good, and I say that install the CentOS 7. So currently the version is we are using is 7. Okay, press any key to begin the installation. So currently it is loading into the temporary memory, or else it initializing the OS installation. Okay. So the software, the program which installs the entire OS is called Anaconda. Okay, yes, I understand in the annual world there is one Anaconda is there, but in the installation of the software also we have Anaconda. That is the installer name. Okay. And so here from here it will be asking the questions. And regarding the installation, there are multiple ways of installing. So this is called interactive. Okay, I'm just selecting the basic defaults, what is available, and I'll change if at all required. So let's go back to date and time. Let's say date and time what we want set. Okay, it's done. And installation dependencies. So we need to say what is the source of your software. It says local media. So can it be remote media also? So that part we'll be discussing while the installation is continuing. So let's say server with GUI and or infrastructure server. Okay, let's take infrastructure server. Okay, so let's go with the this defaults, and later we can add ons. So when you select this one, some default softwares are already selected, and we can select these tools if at all we want ready. Okay, let's go back, set done, and it will be checking the what you call the media. So once you select the once you have completed your selection, then the system will be keep on checking whether this completed, whether this particular software is available in the ISO or not, given ISO or not. Okay, coming back to the installation. So there are multiple ways of installing. One is the local installation destination. So it is asking to create a partition. So while learning anything, let's try to go with the defaults and let's see what it teaches us. So it says that I say that okay, go with the defaults. I'll try to do the additional partitions later. We don't want to get into any complex situations. Okay, and it says begin installation. Okay, so here while the installation is happening, we can say so we can set a root password. Okay, let's try to put any password which is more than approximately 7 to 8 characters. Now it says password is not matching. Okay, we are able to set the root password, and there are some 491 are there, still it is continuing on. So in installation we have some local installation using ISO, we can install it, and there is a remote installation, or we call NFS installation, and the other one is a PXE installation. So in this all this installation, there is a file called case.cfg which we will be going which will be kept under /root. After the installation done, we can look into that. So what is that is called? That is called silent installation. So in installation, one is the interactive installation, another is the non-interactive installation. So in the non-interactive installation, we need to give all the answers, say like this, yes, no, all right, everything into a single file, and give it as an input, so that the machine can take the installation software. Annapurna can take the inputs from the answer file and install the OS for us. Then why we need the installation to be also to do the this way is, suppose you want to have a requirement to deploy in a say 100 machines at a time. Then what you need to do? You can't sit and in front of all the machines and configure it. So what I need to do? I just need to work smart, not hard, and install it and configure it. So if you use a NF installation or remote installation, we can install all the servers at a time. So means if everything is networking and the rest of things is configured is good, under say half an hour, 45 minutes, I can install all the 100 machines in a single go. Okay, so that is the ease of using and the tools are available within the Linux CD, and we can create it, or else we have the text file which will be kept under /root, and we can go to that, edit it, and we can use that as a answer file. So this is a very basic version of installing software. Okay, so once the installation is done, let's try to reboot the machine and try to log in and see how it happens. And so in between, let's have a chat about the what we call the architecture of Linux. Okay, so this is Linux is of the there is a monolithic and modular. So these are the two words we hear: monolithic kernel and modular by microkernel. So what is monolithic is, let me take a very simplified example. Suppose in a day in day out, what we have, suppose you are a student and you go to college, and do you take all your reading material, the textbooks, notes and everything, and take it with you to college daily? So consider there are some, you buy 2 reference books for each subject. Do you take them all the way to your college and bring it back? No. So what we will do, we will take what is necessary to attend the class and come back. Or else let's take another example. Suppose you go to a movie. Do you take all your books with you? Okay, no. Why? Because I don't need books in a movie. It's the same here. So what is a monolithic is, there are something called as modules. So what are the modules? The necessary software or drivers which are required to connect to maybe the hardware or to use the other jobs. So when you start in the old or the other OS, what it will do is, it will load each and every driver into memory, and after that we might be using only 1% or 2% of it. But here we are using just like the books. If you take each and textbook you buy when to the college or to the movie, actually you don't use it. You are just making yourself tired. So instead of this, work smartly and you can take the book what is required. So in the monolithic kernel also, every module is tied into the or uploaded into the memory. Okay, in spite of there is no use, but still it is there. So this is the design in a Minix. So and then Linus Torvalds said that no, it should not be like that. Let the modules will be on the hard disk, and whenever it is required, then I'll load it again. So that's the same reason. We, even though consider we have an Android phone. So Android is a Linux OS, and here we have the Red Hat Linux. Because Linux can be, or else there is some devices, maybe the watch, what you can, smart watches or anything. So it might be having a Linux kernel. Means you can tear down the Linux kernel into so small size such that it can work on your phone or in the smart watches to the servers. So what is the difference is, we are eliminating unnecessary modules into the kernel. We are not loading it. Whatever is required, suppose in Android phone I need only the software which is required, and those are only I am loading into it. Okay, that is the difference. That's the primary difference between the rest of operating system to here. And So here in the Linux administration, there is a very easy way of working. So consider this is your Linux environment, and this is your hardware. Okay. On top of the hardware, our kernel will be there. Okay. Whenever required, the modules will be loaded into the kernel. So this kernel will be talking to the hardware and get our work done. Okay, which is cool. So to connect to the Linux for the end user, because kernel is into the kernel talks only the binary language, and to talk to the kernel, I need to learn the low level programming language. So what people has done is they separated the learning of all the lower level languages, and they created two different environments. So what are the environments? One is called GUI, one is called CLI. Okay, so in this one, in the CLI in Linux, we have two desktops. One is called KDE, one is GNOME. Okay, so let me label it so that it will be easy for you. This is the hardware. Okay, and this is your kernel. This is the CLI environment, or we call it as bash, or it has a shell, or we can use K shell or SH also. So here this is called KDE, and here it is called GNOME. And what is this one? This is your display driver or display service, or you can say XFS or XDaemon. We call it as X server. Okay, so any user can directly start using the CLI. Okay, it doesn't need a GUI to work in Linux, and he can log in into the KDE. Okay, that is also fine, it is equal, and or else he can install a KDE GNOME desktop and he can use it, or else you can use only the just extern service or external. Here we call it as this extern. So these are the ways any user can interact with this kernel. So it is the same thing, right? It doesn't have to be anything. So generally the production servers will not be having this KDE and GNOME, only they will be having the CLI or command line, and there we use the bash. So again, what is a bash? Earlier we used to have SH shell, and so there some guy has rewritten the entire SH shell, and he named it as, his name is Born. So it is not BORN, BOURNE, Born Again shell. So he included his name in the shell, and which we are using right now. So if you are logging with the terminal from the console, then imagine that there is a, and you can switch the shells also. Okay, so let's see the progress of the installation. Okay, installation is done. Let's reboot it. Okay, so it just completed. It went down and down. It got shut down, and the installation or the rebooting is in progress. Okay. Okay, so what we are seeing is the console, or else the command prompt. So let's say root and password. Okay, so here we can say what is the username. We logged as root, and we can say who am I, and to understand your OS installed, say uname -e. Okay. Okay, this will tell you the type of kernel what we are using, and the host name and all that stuff. Okay, so this is all about installing the Linux operating system. So in next area, what we need to do is we need to understand about the commands. So here the current run level is, so there is something called as run levels, and we'll discuss. So currently it is 3. So here please remember there are 0 to 6 run levels are there. 0 is for reboot, okay, 1 is for a single user, 2 is for the single with network, and 3 with multiple users with network, and 4 is not defined, they kept it for future purposes, and 5 is you can say run level 3 plus GUI. Okay, so here the 5 is the number 3, run level 3 plus GUI. So multiple users with networking and the GUI. So to stop and start the Linux mission, what you need to do is init 0 or init 3 or init 5. So init 4 doesn't work, and if you say init 0, then the server will server will shut down. So if I say init say 6, the OS will reboot. So we have to be very cautious in working as the root account, because when we press init 6, then immediately the OS will start shutting down. So let's try. Here the machine is going for a reboot, and this is called a grub prompt, we are going to discuss in the advanced classes. So then the machine will go for a reboot and it will start with the freshly. So if at all you are using in a production environment, be very careful. Without a proper approval, you should not be rebooting any production server or using this one. So that's the same reason we need to use a user called any unprivileged user, and then only we'll be using it. So we'll be discussing about this in the user management and the command lines in the next sessions. Okay, till then, take care. Bye.